And we're back, and it's COMP1073, client-side scripting, and in the winter 2016 semester, and it's week 4, lesson 4, part 1. And today, I want to kind of go over assignment number 1 for this first part, talk about what it's due. Now, again, I meant to give this to you last week, again, due to technical issues we had with Azure and with GitHub and all that stuff. I wanted to bang all that away because your assignment number 1 requires that you do that. We also did a little lab last week, so hopefully most of you got a chance to do all that. It will be marked this week. I'll make sure everything's marked and up to date for you guys. But let's take a look at assignment number 1. So if you find that, you can look at assignment 1 in your up on Blackboard. If you look on Blackboard under assignments, you should see assignment number 1. And it's a very straightforward assignment, but let's talk about it because there are some parts that may confuse you or we have to talk about it to describe. No, that's not what I wanted to look at, but that's okay because we're going to look at that too. I meant to do this one. There we go. Okay, here we go. So this is due Friday, February the 12th at midnight. Now normally I don't do that. That's like week 5. That's next week. I normally would give you a chance to write this, next week by Wednesday at midnight, the day before class. But I'm going to give you an extra couple days because typically, like I said, I would have given this to you last week. All right. Now this isn't a difficult one. I call it the mini portfolio only because there's not a lot of content you have to provide here. So what is this thing that you're going to build? You're going to make a little website, okay? And the website's going to have 3 pages, right? 1 page is about you, right? It's got to include a personal logo, like, your own. And I don't know, who doesn't know how to make a logo? Put up your hand. You guys are all kind of more creative types, yeah? Anybody? You kind of know? I mean, it could be as simple as your name, like, or some initials, and I don't know, a shape. I mean, I'm really simple like that. I don't care how you make it. I mean, obviously, if this is something that you want to do, and if you want to be a web developer, you should already have a logo or have an idea of what you want to put together. And the reason why is this is going to be like your signet ring for me, right? So when I see your website, it's going to look different than everyone else's website. Okay, so a little logo, some recent image of you, and a single paragraph that describes your personal mission statement. That's it, all right? Now, it sounds like pretty simple, and it's going to be pretty blank. So be creative in the way you lay out the page, right? That means you could use different colors, different paneling. This is, it could be, look at it's a regular web project, but all I'm asking you to do is lay these elements out. Now, there's some tricks to this because it's not just laying out web pages. Otherwise, why are we doing JavaScript, right? And there should be another page. It's a contact page that includes a simple contact form, right? The third page really shows off 3 of your favorite projects, web or otherwise, whatever kind of project you have, right? And we'll go into the details here in a second. So really a very simple page, a very simple 3-page site, that's due next week by Wednesday. Doesn't have to be, or by Friday. Doesn't have to be very complex, but there's some challenges here. This is the challenges for you from a JavaScript perspective. So your bio page, okay, personal logo, like we said, a recent image of you, and a short paragraph that outlines your personal mission. All the text on the page should come from string variables. Oh, so you can't just put it inside your HTML. The HTML is going to be generated from your JavaScript. So when your JavaScript runs, boom, it injects your data. You're going to write some string variables. You can write them as ugly as you like. Right now, I don't care. Right? Make them one big string literal. If you're really, for extra marks, if you want to use a JSON file, you can do that if you know how to do that. Good luck on that one. I'm not going to, that's pretty big marks for me, bonuses. But all it needs to do is get some data for each of these things. For example, if I have a little mission statement, I could have a variable called mission, right? And in my mission, I have a big long string, right? Take that string, pump it out into your bio page. That's it. It's really quite simple, right? So we're going to talk about how to do that. So it's going to be a little bit of manipulation, all right? The main reason why I want you to get to do this assignment, though, to be honest with you, minus the manipulation that we're doing, is I want you to structure a site properly, deploy it to GitHub, continuous deploy to Azure. Set up your page structure and everything else the way it's supposed to be done, and set up a container that we're going to use other assignments for. So I'm going to go assignment 2, assignment 3, assignment 4, whatever it's going to be. Each of these other assignments is going to kind of tack on to this one, right? So I'm going to ask you to modify or add a page or do some calculations or make that form that we have on here work properly. How do we do that? But I need a structure for you to start off. So think about this as, one assignment out of a multi-assignment kind of flow, okay? So again, some basic stuff. You have an app.js file, and that app.js file is going to feed a series of strings into your, or inject content into your page. Okay, how do we do that? Your contact page, kind of a short form that asks the user for their contact information. I just put in a few things: name, contact number, and a short message, and a submit button. Right? That's what all you need on that one. And when the user clicks the submit button, the form will take the user back to the bio page. Right? Almost like the bio page being your landing page, if you will. Right? And the form does not have to work for this assignment. It means you don't have to kind of enter the information and it's going to store it in a database or pull it back into data. Not yet. But I want you to have the form structure there so when we do assignment number 2, you're ready to go and we can pull data from that form. Okay? A projects page, which includes details, text, and images of 3 of your favorite projects that we talked about. So the text for each project will come from the string variables in your app.js file again. Right? So again, the same thing, but you're going to use a bunch of different variables to hold different data. That's going to pump out at different places in your HTML pages. Okay, so why this? Why? Because you need to manipulate enough to know how to manipulate the DOM a little bit and inject information or content in different places in your HTML web pages. That's really what this thing is about from a JavaScript perspective. On the other side, I have a section here on structure. So this is site structure. There's 8 marks here. Right? Most of the marks are here, because if you notice the marks are broken down, 14 marks for UI. So how beautiful it looks, how you've laid things out, and all that kind of stuff. How creative you can be. This is where you can get your marks for creativity and presentation. And also from a functionality perspective, how it functions. So how does it inject stuff into the page? So for example, if I have a string and it has a whole paragraph of information, how do I format that string? How does it look when it goes back out? Well, I'm going to use CSS to make sure when I get that data, it formats nicely and appears on the page the way I like it, right? So there's still a CSS element on your end to make sure that you know how to use. You're going to review the stuff that you already know how to do with HTML and CSS basics, okay? Now certainly, and this is going back to the site structure, you can use Bootstrap, because remember we talked about this in the course. If you know how to use Bootstrap, I'm not expecting you to know or to use CSS for this course just off, write things from scratch, because this is not a CSS course and it's not an HTML course. It's a JavaScript course. So I'm getting you to the focus. I'm pulling the focus away from CSS and HTML and into JavaScript. So if you want to use Bootstrap to kind of align or style your page, I'm totally good with that. And actually, in fact, it's a requirement on your site. So you're going to include Bootstrap CSS framework. It doesn't mean you have to use it. I just want you to include it for now in your web page as one of your structure points, right? And I have examples of that from the first day we got together, right? I don't kind of link it to Bootstrap and everything else. And the same thing goes with FontAwesome. Even though we don't need to use FontAwesome, right? I just want you to link to the FontAwesome, library and include it into your HTML files. Now, if you don't want to use FontAwesome, it's okay. I just want you to link them for now, right? Because we're going to access them later. Okay. So that's that part. So one part is UI and functionality, the other part is structure, and then there's a third part that's here that's internal documentation. What does it mean? So really I want you to make some headers, comment headers, in your CSS and JavaScript files. Right? So CSS, I mean, if you're going to do any kind of custom work, you do some comment headers there and kind of split up what kind of styling you're going to do. That's kind of required for most of us when we do web work. And the same thing goes with your JavaScript. I'd like you to comment, have a little section on the top of your JavaScript file that says my file name, here's my author, the website name, file description, and so on. Just very, very brief. Nothing too crazy. That's the top part of your JavaScript file, right? Right now, you probably only need one JavaScript file, app.js. You can call it main.js. You can call it whatever you like, .js, as long as you access it and you connect it to your HTML document. Notice that I'm not allowing you to use inline JavaScript. I haven't asked you to use it at all, and I never will in this course because it's not good form. We talked about separation of concerns, and now we have this progressive enhancement. We look at the behavior layer, which is all about JavaScript, is in a separate folder, a separate process, if you will, and that's how I want you to look at JavaScript. I never want you as web developers or designers to see JavaScript as something you can lazily inject into code inline. That would be a bad thing to do, right? And it's kind of passé. We've moved past that in kind of the web development world, right? If we see that, that's something that is done typically from JavaScript can be injected from other JavaScript. You might see that, and that's what you might see the end result of as an example. Or you might see something like an old website or something that's being generated by something like Dreamweaver, because Dreamweaver injects a lot of little inline JavaScript too. And that's why I shy away from Dreamweaver, because sometimes you don't know what you get. right? When you do kind of drag and drop operations. Same thing with Expression Web and some other drag and drop frameworks. You get a lot of stuff that happens in your website, and it happens automatically or automagically, if you will, when you drag and drop stuff into your page. Yeah.
Does that apply to Google Analytics? Because they tell you to put it right in your HTML.
That's different. That's a Google Analytics link, but although you could use a separate JavaScript file for that, right? Even though they tell you to put it inline, right? You could point to a JavaScript file with that, because remember, it gets cached. If I include a JavaScript file on the bottom of my page, right, and that JavaScript file has a Google Analytics code, it's the same thing as included in the bottom of your page. It's exactly the same, right? It's just easier for most people to put it in line, but it's not the best way. Okay, so again, internal documentation. We talked about this, and please don't over-comment. Just give me, if I was going to ask you for some comments on a specific function or something that you're doing, as an example that you, it doesn't appear clear from the very first, you're trying something different, that's where I want you to comment that particular function, but the actual code should comment mostly itself. So use contextual variable names, all that kind of stuff as normal, nothing that's out of the ordinary. Please don't use I's and J's and weird letters for your loops if you're going to do just kind of looping or anything like that when we get together and we do an assignment. Okay, so all things have to be contextual. So that means we have a lot of room to make variable names as long as we want, right? Now you don't want them too long, because then they'll be like unwieldy. Like you can't really use them because they're so bloody long, right? But it's got to be something that makes sense. So if I'm going to make a variable, for example, for my mission, personal mission, I might call it personal mission, right? Why would I call it pers, P-E-R-S, right? Some people do that. They kind of shorten their variable names. Please don't do that. I want to be able to look at your JavaScript code and go, oh yeah, I get what this person's doing, right? I understand what he or she is trying to do here, right? Finally, on step 4 here, share your files on GitHub to demonstrate version control best practices and push your site to a cloud host. Notice that it doesn't say auto deploy, right? I would think that that's best practices for you, but I'm not going to force you to do it. Okay, so that's kind of your project in a nutshell. So you need to know how to do this. So last week we did that lab to kind of get you to, march you along to get all the technology in place for you. I think we've done technology enough for the first 3 weeks, right? We're not going to do that stuff anymore. I swear to you, I'm not going to talk to you. If you have a question, I got tons of videos now on GitHub, on cloud deployment, auto deployment, all that stuff. We're not touching that again. If you do have a problem with that, make an appointment with me and we'll go over it, one-on-one. Otherwise, if you have a problem today in class, I got Rich in the class. I also have Anju. She can help you out as well, right? And other people, if you want to help each other in the class, if one person doesn't know something and you know something and they put up their hand and say, Tom, I have a problem with GitHub, maybe you want to stand up and say, I'll help him or I'll help her, and you can go over and help out. It's another way to learn. So please, no more technology issues. We're not going to talk about that. Submitting your work. This is key. I want a zip archive, not a RAR archive, a zip archive, right, of your website's project files. And that goes up on Blackboard. Okay, that's what should be included. A link to your GitHub repository, right? And a link to your live mini portfolio site hosted with a cloud provider, right? So those are the 3 things I need for a complete submission, all right, for your summit number 1. I also have a little bit of a rubric here. If you notice, it's broken down the marks. So from a UI perspective, there's 14 marks. So I really have split it up UI and functionality equally. So you got some good creativity plus some simple functionality that I'm giving you equal marks for. So this is not a great difficulty in completing this assignment. Site structure, again, there's a little bit of weight on site structure because I want you to have a scripts folder. I want you to have a content folder. I want you to use Bootstrap. I want you to use FontAwesome. I mean, when I say use, I mean just include them in your HTML for now. Even if you don't use the libraries, I'm okay with that. And version control and cloud deployment, 4 marks each. But notice for version control what I've asked you to do. If you just pop your repository up on GitHub one time because you did everything and then finally as an afterthought you're like, hey, I'll just pop it up on GitHub so I get my 4 points. No. That's 2 points. 4 points would mean you're using GitHub as it should be used, right? You're developing and I do a feature, pop it up on GitHub. Do a commit. Do another feature, another commit. That's the right way to do it, right? As opposed to, oh damn, Tom asked me to do stuff on GitHub, throw it up on GitHub, right? That's just like a backup. If you're using GitHub as a backup, 2 points. If you use it as a regular tool that you're using for development, 4 points. Okay, that's how it works. And for cloud hosting, again, that's where you get your 4 points. It's really quite simple. As long as you host it and it's live and it works with no errors, you get the full 4 points, right, for cloud hosting. Questions about assignment number 1. Due next week, Friday, midnight. Okay? Guys, girls, please, if you have questions, put your hand up, because we're going to talk about some of the things, how we're going to do this today, because I'm going to show you how to inject code today in your class, right? So you know that I'm going to kind of solve it for you right ahead of time. Like the first thing we're going to tackle today is how do I inject content into my HTML. First thing today we're going to do. So don't worry if you don't know how to do that. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I understood. You said push your site to a cloud host. You don't want to auto deploy.
I didn't mention auto deployment, right? You don't have to.
Set up to auto deploy.
Right. But I'm not going to force you to, because there's other ways of pushing it out to a cloud host. You could push it out to a cloud host through GitHub. You can also use FTP, even in Azure. If you actually look, there's FTP options in Azure if you really want to go old school, right? So that's why I'm not forcing you to do it. I'm just asking you somehow, however you get it done, push it up to a cloud host, because some cloud hosts also, other than Azure, may not have an auto deployment option. Because I'm not forcing you to do Azure. I'm saying a cloud host. You could use, I don't know, DreamHost or some other thing, DigitalOcean if you really want to challenge yourself, or Heroku if you want to build a node site, right? So there's different options for cloud hosting. One thing I will not accept is GitHub pages or a local provider that's not a cloud host. So if you have a friend of yours that says, hey Tom, here's my friend, I know you can't make Azure work, but I'll give you space on my website so you can pop it up on my website, and I'll give you your own domain space or whatever. That doesn't satisfy my requirements, guys. All right, I want you to populate things on a cloud host. This is one of the requirements of this course, right? A little bit of cloud computing. All right, any other questions around this? Very straightforward. Now you're going to ask me, well, how do I lay things out? What if I want to do, one of the questions I always get on this one is, what if I wanted to make my pages like a continuous scrolling site? Because that's kind of a more modern approach to doing kind of a portfolio. I'd accept that, as long as your navigation works right. And one of the options here, one of the site structure pieces, or if you look at the pages, I say a bio page, a contact page, and a projects page. And the last one is kind of a nav bar or a nav panel, which will allow the user to navigate from page to page. So I'm getting really generic here. I mean, you can make it so it's a nav panel on the side. You can make it so it's a floating nav panel. Do whatever you want to do. Be creative, because this is, the beginning maybe of a portfolio site that we're going to kind of, between Rich and I, we're going to kind of tackle this portfolio in different ways over the course of several courses, as coming up, right? So if you have something already, by the time you get to client-side scripting, what you're going to do, we're going to change this portfolio, this mini portfolio that we're starting off here, into something more robust and dynamic by the time we get into client-side scripting. Okay, so whatever you start here is something that you can reuse later, right? If you do a good job, right? And sometimes you start here and maybe you want to discard it later because you did a bad job, right? But at the end of the day, you have a basis. We're going to use this portfolio site as a little basis, a container for all the other things we're going to be doing here in this course. Okay? I think so. If you any concerns, like trying to get it done time-wise, I know a lot of people said there's like 5. You guys have 5 assignments due next week.
No, I haven't. I'm up to 4.
You're 4. Anyone else have like 4 or 5 assignments due next week?
Rich.
Some people. Rich is really taxing you. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, no, we got one.
Poor guy, right?
I gave the mine first.
So actually, it's my fault. I'm tacking it on. I'm following up with Rich, right? Yeah. So it's not his fault. It's my fault. And you know what? It happens a lot. Yes. And then a Mallory.
I started a portfolio site of mine already, but didn't get too far, so I wouldn't mind using that.
Sure.
If we keep going. I already have more than 3 projects.
That's I love it. So you know what? That's a great question. And you know why? Because this stuff that I'm putting up here, ladies and gentlemen, is the minimum requirements. Minimal viable product is what I'm asking here. You want to add other pages. You want to make your portfolio site pop, right? Really look nice and have things like, other kinds of stuff, privacy policy and usage, all that kind of stuff. You can totally do that on the bottom. You can make it so that there's a services page. You can expand it to have a separate landing page. You can do whatever you like. This is your portfolio site. What I'm asking for is these minimum pages because I've only given you a week. So I've got to kind of pull back on the requirements, right? So if you cover my requirements and then some, I'm going to give you bonus marks, right? That's what it comes down to. Mallory.
The project page is that like the image of the project and like a description of it and then like a link to it.
That's the assumption. The assumption it would be a link to the project, but it's okay if you just have an image for now, because I'm not going to make you, because that means that would require extra pages. And just from a time frame perspective, I can't expect you to link to the project and then you see the project page. For now, all I want is like kind of like a snapshot of what the project would be about. Like let's say, for example, you're a game programmer as well. I'm a game programmer, and I made something in Unity or in Unreal, right, or something, and I made a little game or some kind of web game, something like that. And then I might have a snapshot of the web game with some little, kind of a little blurb of what that game's about, right? That's my project number one, right? And I might have a couple sections in how I lay that out. Yeah, sure. Here, go
I'll
ahead.
show you one from a web student who graduated. She's out working now, so here's her portfolio. So she didn't do this as a school project, but it started as a school project. So she's working for a web shop in town.
There we go. So that's you see a background that,
Yep, so she did give samples of her work.
nice. Right, is it responsive too?
Yep.
Guessing it would be, right? Because she's probably using some kind of bootstrap or something.
No, she did. I think she did the CSS herself.
On the
so
cell?
here,
Oh, beautiful.
Let's
That's
shrink it
fantastic.
down.
Yeah.
That go to mobile. Oops.
That's okay. What do you want to do?
Yeah, so shrink it, scale.
Oh,
it for-
just do one of
I
these.
didn't
Just
know if you had it.
pull it down. Just see what happens, right? Oh yeah. Beautiful.
Keep going.
That's it. That's great. So see how so her site's responsive, so it changes flow depending on how big it is as I go to a small screen. Actually, the mobile version looks actually cooler in my opinion than the actual big site itself. Take a look. So you got almost like at the left and right side of the brain, it looks like here, right? When I go here, you don't see that image. So it's kind of a whole different design. Well, here it is right here, right?
So this is the kind of thing you want to have when you're out job hunting, we're going to say.
Okay.
What have you done, what can you do? If you have a good looking portfolio that shows your projects, it's going to help you get there.
Who else has something that started already? You're saying there's something. Anyone else have kind of something started? Anybody at all? This is a great start then for you. If you have, maybe it's a kind of a kick in the right direction, right? So that way you guys get going, move together to build some kind of website. Maybe you haven't been asked to build something that's personal. This is for you, right? This isn't just for me, right? So if you're doing it just to satisfy my requirements, okay. But really, that's not really why I'm trying to get it done for you. I'm trying to set you up so over the course, the kind of the flow of the next several courses we do together, right? Between myself and Rich and other professors, you're going to have a container because they're going to ask you for some kind of portfolio site or some kind of site that you want to add to. And you know what? Your portfolio site, think about it as almost like as a demonstration of your skill, right? Whether it comes from a design or a programming perspective. Okay, so that's why I'm asking you to do it. Again, requirements are low, but you can always add to them. What I'm asking for are the minimum requirements for this assignment, but you can always include additional pieces. Any other questions around this? One other site I always like pointing my students to, which is just for inspiration, is the awards site. And I don't know if I've done that before, but let's take a look here. So I like to look at awards. If I go AWWW, like 3 W's in the awards. So website awards. This is kind of a site that has some really cool layouts. And again, it's like you may see something that you really like here from an idea perspective. If I search for something like portfolio here, it'll give me some portfolio sites that are recent, that have been submitted for kind of review, right? So you can certainly look at some of these and see maybe some pieces you like. Now, these might be beyond your reach right now in terms of creation, right? You might say, hey, this is kind of cool, right? But I can't really do this right now within a week and a half, kind of thing. I don't have the time to do it. But it's not something that you couldn't include. You couldn't include piece parts of some of this stuff, or over the course of this course that we're in together, kind of add to your own portfolio. Because your portfolio should be like a living document, if you will, like an online, something that's going to continue to evolve and change, right? You don't want to stay stagnant. You don't want your portfolio site to always look the same. One other thing I want to mention is, I know we talked about colors a little bit, and maybe you've learned about colors in other courses, but if you go to Adobe, again, adobe.color, if I'm not wrong. Is it adobecolor.com? There it is. I always mess that up. If you go there, you got your color palette. Please try and make the colors so that they complement each other. There's some kind of pattern or rhyme and reason behind your colors. sometimes I get these colors that are really bright and a little bit, the yellows and the greens are, I'll be honest with you, a little bit more aggressive to look at times, right? So I'm more of a person that likes to mute some of the colors, but it really depends on who you are, right? So if you're more of a yellow greenish kind of person, just use that color scheme with care, right? So you can still use some yellows and everything else in a complementary scheme, but once you start going into things like shades of yellow, like if I was going to go into shades of yellow, it can kind of get a little bit annoying to look at. So please, watch the greens and yellows. I know that some people like to include them again for highlights. Those are cool, especially if you're working for something like a compound or triad or something like that, or an analogous color scheme. Again, you want to be careful with that. Right? So some of these colors could be used for highlighting and so on. I personally like to stay away from some of that stuff, and depending on the site, because my style is more conservative, right? You might be more flamboyant with your website and all that kind of stuff, and that's totally cool. And remember, site colors and branding, if you will, should all complement each other. Nowadays, one of the, from a web trends perspective, is larger images on your site. We don't have a lot of content for what I've asked you for. Your bio page has a little paragraph, right? So a lot of times we wrap our content with like a big image. So where are you going to get those images for? Well, there's lots of image sites out there that you can grab some royalty-free images, and that's what you want to kind of look for. Please don't steal your images from somewhere else, or go and Google it and say, hey, here's a portfolio image, I'm just going to include it into my site. That's like a no-no for us, right? So please don't do that kind of stuff. I know young developers, designers are tempted to do that, like Google it. I know you've probably been told this a million times from other professors. I'm going to tell you again, it's a no-no. Please make your own. It doesn't take much. What's your favorite tools? If I was going to ask you your favorite tools for graphics and logo creation, you guys have been doing that with different professors here. What would you say your favorite tool? Is it a Photoshop? Who likes Photoshop?
Just learned Illustrator.
You like Illustrator is cool for logos for sure. It's awesome for logos. What about other things? What, Photoshop for graphic manipulation? You guys learn a little bit about that?
I've used Affinity Tools. I don't know if you know.
Affinity tools? No, that's another tool set. What about anyone else? For me, I'm an old Fireworks guy, and I think I've talked about this before. Like last week when I did that whole array thing, I used Fireworks, right? Because it's a very simple tool. It's a scaled down version of Photoshop kind of thing, and it was used a lot for things like creating ping images and so on, right? So it's easy to create a few things on your site that to make it look unique or original. You have some time to do it, even if you make your own icons, buttons, any kind of so the look and feel is unique. It doesn't take a lot for you to create something, and you guys being kind of sitting on the creative side of the house should be able to kind of put something together that's unique. So that's one. The other thing is, please try and avoid sounds for whatever reason on your site. Some people have these like little clicky sounds where you go on a link and it goes bing, 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 bing. It's like, when I hear that kind of stuff, I want to take my computer and like go, right? Or like turn it off, right? Or shoot the people who made that site, right? So please don't do that. That's totally old school. We don't use sites and sounds like sounds on the site too much, unless the site itself is about sound, right? If you're selling image sounds or whatever, audio clips, okay, it makes sense. If you're making a game site, right? So the site is about a game, and you can play a game and hear your background sounds. Cool, that makes sense. If you're watching a movie and the movie itself, the whole site is streamed to look like the movie, some kind of interface that's related to the movie, fine, right? But other than that, please don't include sounds. That's really truly passé. And no animated GIFs, all right? Please, all right? I know some people are tempted to use animated GIFs for some of their stuff. It's making a comeback, actually. For whatever reason, animated GIFs on like regular websites to kind of to produce faux dynamic, whatever content, if you will, like creating an ad, like which is some kind of animated GIF. I mean, okay, but I recommend against it, please. Okay, animated GIFs bad, all right. And also, when it comes to embedding videos, some people like to embed videos on their site, like actually from YouTube, and use an iframe, right? That's bad too, right? Because that means chances are your website won't be fully mobile compatible, right? So the better approach would be make the link to the video look like an embedded link, but actually you go to YouTube, right? Right? Yeah. So it looks like the exact thumbnail that comes from YouTube, right? The same thing that you get in an iframe, right? But don't use an iframe. Just click on this big image that takes you to YouTube, and now you see the video on YouTube. Because mostly, if I have a smartphone, right, and if I click on a YouTube link, it's going to take me to my YouTube app. And most of us have a YouTube app on our iPhone or something that'll play YouTube. Yeah.
Why do you say the video is not mobile friendly?
It depends on the type of video and how you put it together, right? So to me, it's better not to have a video because you don't know how you've embedded it, how it's going to look on another person's smartphone, and how the laws are going to change for embedded video. It's better to have it as a link and use the YouTube built-in app, right, for your mobile device. And if it's for example, on your website, right, if you click onto it and it takes you to YouTube, nothing's wrong with that, right? Now I know a lot of providers still use an embedded link, but you're using iframes, and iframes are a no-no, right, in the web world. We don't do that. We try and avoid iframes at all costs. It's not a very good thing, and it's bad from a Google Analytics perspective as well.
But having the video on my server, why?
You can point to the video on your server, right, and then you can play it in on another page. That's okay, right? Like for example, if you use WebM or something like that, another format that plays the video live on your page, right? But if I'm linking to it, if I have a YouTube video on YouTube, I want to go to YouTube, and I want to make organic links that point to YouTube, and have my YouTube have its own analytics to see who's looking at my YouTube channel, right? Because that's where I want to host all my playlists and everything else. I mean, YouTube is set up for that. Or Twitch, if you're a Twitch person, Vimeo, some other site that you host your files. So you don't want to embed those files. Typically, it's a no-no these days to embed video files inside your site. Okay, so it's just like, best practices we're talking about here. Anyone have any other ideas about what they want to do? Okay, let's get to it. I'm just going to stop this recording now, and I want to use just this first recording to kind of talk about the assignment. So you can always go to the first recording and say, what did he talk about? Where did he say that I needed my assignment? Use this first recording to go back there and look at that, to go over the details.